All right, pal. Well, thanks for doing this, Steve.
Yeah, good morning, and I'm glad to get a chance to catch up.
Oh man. Yeah. Those are some cool posters you got behind you.
Well, these are the new books coming out. Uh,
Yeah.
the one over this shoulder is the one that I've written with Martin, the Science and Practice of Evidence-Based Horsemanship. So you know the book, Evidence-Based
Oh yeah.
Horsemanship. It's about this big. Well, we've been researching the heck out of things, spending a lot of time talking about the practice and the practical application of how you use science to inform your horsemanship. And that's what makes it worthwhile to people, not just a bunch of big scientific words. So this book is something like this. It definitely is evidence-based horsemanship on steroids. So that's going to be out in the fall. And then I tried to find a way. I used to write some poems and do some pencil sketches and stuff. And uh, one or two people would read a poem by me and say, I didn't really understand the neuroscience until you kind of put it in a poem. Um, and that's just the lens I've always seen horses in. So um, I just tried to dabble a little bit with understanding the horse through images and through um, experiences, but captured more in a poem. So it's not like reading through dense science. And a number of people said, I get it now. So I just gathered those together over time, put them in this neuro poetry book, and that's due out on Friday.
Hey, that's awesome, Steve. That's really cool. You did some poetry out there to the gathering. That was really
Oh,
neat.
yeah.
Let's see. That
Yeah,
was
I
well, not this
always,
year. That was 2 years ago, right? Yeah, I think it was
yeah.
good.
And I want your listeners to know just really how much I respect your work with mules. And when they're dealing with you, they're dealing with somebody who's just insatiable about learning. When Martin and I saw you in Elko, you were just there, not not that you weren't there for the art and the gathering, the social aspect, but you were just so enthusiastic about soaking in more knowledge, and we were really impressed with that. And I've ever since I've known you, that's kind of been your modus operandi is just learning never stops. And it's not just for the your own understanding. I know you do it for the welfare of the mules, because they benefit in the long run if you're clear in your messages, if if they understand you, if you work with their nervous system instead of against it. It's just so much easier for human and for mule or horse. So I appreciate all you do.
Yeah. Well, hey, when I talk about my mentors, you're up there at the top of the list there, Steve. You and Martin both have taught me so much. And yeah, I'm excited about these new books. This is going to be really good. I'm still waiting for my commission check from the first book because I, I tell all my students to buy that book, shoot, I try to get them all, just about every clinic. Have you read Evidence-Based Horsemanship? You need to read it. You need to understand, especially, I feel like, I don't know, Steve, I feel like the mule world is 20 years behind, maybe 30 years behind the horse world, and just in funny myths and funny things that people think. And when you bring this science to the table and you're really telling people, hey, hold on, this is how the brain really works. These are what fire, and this is what's happening here. Um, Man, it totally changes things. One of the biggest myths, and I just love how you stomp this one in the dirt, is that the mule or the horse, whatever, is going to hold a grudge, going to hold a grudge, and it's just Well, I usually make a joke. I'll say, well, first of all, what are you doing that requires the mule to hold a grudge against you?
Yeah.
That's the first thing that should be addressed. But anyways, it's just myths like that that you guys are doing a great job of stomping in the dirt, and I like it.
Well, you can understand, excuse me, that the only point of reference that people have for how the horse or the mule's brain works is their own. And so that's what they use as their point of reference. Um, so it's not far-fetched if they're doing that to think, well, that horse is purposely pulling one over on me and then going back to pasture, telling all the other horses, you know, they're having a good chuckle at my expense. And it sounds silly when you put it out like that,
Yeah.
but people don't necessarily question that. They just feel that and operate in that way. And instead of communicating with the nervous system, so you're both on a level plane of understanding, actually, when you feel justified in punishing them because you have the going off these myths, now you're sending that horse or mule in the opposite direction. Do you think that's going to improve your connection or your understanding? It's just adding more noise. It's just making your job harder in in what you're trying to accomplish together as a team. And that's really what you should be doing. Well, I'm not going to say should, you can do what you want, but so much more gets accomplished when there's a dialogue between you and your mule or you and your horse versus a monologue forced. They can get very robotic, they can get resentful, and that's something they can get. They can get agitated when you just keep drilling them, drilling them, and drilling them. And I know what happens in the brain. They just check out. And so, they go through the motions, but you're not really building a brain that desires to learn because there's curiosity in there and the uh, desire to explore. And when you bring that out of your horse, they become super learners. But you drive that into the closet and they don't want to show you anything. And who did it? Not the horse, not the mule. It's the person that presented that environment. I like to tell people, you know, you may say, well, I'm a horse trainer and here's my training techniques. But your movement, even your breath, your rhythm, that's all. You're taking an entire environment. So you are the environment that you take out to your animal. You get pissed off because you didn't pay a bill or you had a fight with your girlfriend. You're taking that now into that environment. And don't think that those nervous systems don't pick up on that. If people know that story of Clever Hans, where Clever Hans was just exquisitely picking out every little detail, changes in breath, changes in movement in their owner, that they're not picking that up off you. Get yourself in a hurry, then go out there and try to catch your horses in a pasture. They'll tell you.
Yeah, we always I tell students all the time, hey, you know what? Your horsemanship and your mulemanship, it started first thing in the morning, right when you woke up. Your whole day, everything you do affects what's coming. And you know, if we can't control ourselves, we're never going to be able to control the things we want to control in the horse or the mule. If I can't control my emotions, it's not very fair for me to think I can control my mules. If I get upset at the littlest thing, or if I pack her, I think probably one of the biggest weaknesses a lot of us have, Steve, is we carry around with us that stress. And I don't think, and I know you don't think that stress is bad. Stress isn't bad. Stress is how we learn, right? You hear Martin say all the time,
Yep.
there's no growth in the comfort zone, and there's no comfort in the growth zone. So we know stress isn't totally a negative thing, but the big thing that you guys have taught me is, okay, but how do we cope with stress? How do we self-regulate? And I think that's where the money is right there.
That's the key word right there, Ty, self-regulate, because um, if you have your head down on the desk or you're looking out the window or you're bored, you're really not in a spot where you're sympathetically aroused enough. Your nervous system's not aroused enough to focus. If you think you're going to fail the test and you better pay attention to everything that the instructor's saying, you might sit in the front row and get your notebook out, and now you're laser focused because of that little bit of anxiety. Um, and that's that sympathetic arousal that you need. Now the problem is that if we take that a little too high and we don't let them come down, that's the whole key is you dial it up a little bit with your horse or mule, and then you let them know that they after they've learned something, it's a little stressful, they get to come down, they get to lick and chew, they get to process that that information. And so we at that point in time, we would only get in the way of how their brain can optimize their learning. So why get your ego involved to get in the way? And oftentimes we get them here sympathetically aroused, and the problem is we chase them up and then we leave them there, and then they don't feel good about not being able to know that there's a safe way back down again. So what Martin does, he sort of dials it up, challenges them where they're focused, they can learn, and then lets them come back down and process. And each wave he does that, the window of what they're able to tolerate gets larger and larger. And so he calls those his special forces horses. Those are horses that he tells me, I don't really know how I could panic this horse. My horse knows its way back down. I can focus on a cow and what I need to do with that cow, and I don't even worry about my horse because my horse knows how to control its own emotions because that's what we practice. We don't practice the task necessarily. We practice working on your nervous system so that you're able to learn without coming apart. Um, and yeah, sometimes humans get locked in and they don't know how to come down. They get so frazzled with all the multitasking and all the stuff they got to do and all their stress. And if they get locked up there, that chronic stress actually kills neurons in the brain. It actually causes atrophy and kills cells if you're stuck up there. So I would tell people as well, you got to find a way to come back down. I don't care if you take a walk in the woods, maybe you just hand walk your horse around, but it might help because the the interaction with your horse is two nervous systems coming together. If you yell louder in English, that doesn't mean your horse understands better, right? But if you know where their nervous system is, they definitely know where yours is. And you could make a mark in the sand, or maybe if you keep your horse boarded somewhere and you're coming along the road, pick a mailbox or something and make that your marker for checking in on yourself and say, okay, what nervous system am I bringing to in with my horse today? Because you're responsible for that. And if your horse picks up on that and reacts to that, who's responsible for that reaction? That horse may not be capable without its really evolved frontal lobe to be able to sort that out. So we got to take some responsibility in what we bring to the table, not just that animal.
Oh, man, and that's tough to do. Something I have my students do, Steve, at my clinics is, and this is mostly for me, just to see where they're at. But I'll have them come up, and we'll work on. I just want to see how they pick up on a rein, and so I'll be holding a lead rope or something, and I'll say, okay, ask me kind of go to this way, or ask me to go this way, or whatever. And I can feel how nervous the person is, and I've tried to even dial it in to where I'm trying to pay attention to their breathing. There's so many people that come up and they hold their breath. They hold their breath and they're tense and they're tight, and it plays out in that lead rope or those reins. And then, so we'll usually do the physical exercise, and they don't know that we're going to talk about the deeper stuff here. I'll say, okay, well, that's all great. You know, we picked up on this rain and we did this. I said, but majority of you, how many of you were really nervous? And almost all of them, raise their hand. I said, is this the most nerve-wracking part of the clinic coming up in front here? Like, oh yeah, yeah, you bet. I said, well, here's something interesting. I could feel that tension. I knew it. I could feel it through the rain. I was watching your breathing, and a bunch of you held your breath while you were up here, and I said, think about, and I'm just a basic human, think about these horses and these mules, how perceptive they are of the body and of these other things that a lot of us humans miss because we talk so much, I suppose. We miss out on these little signs and signals.
We run this dialogue in our head and we create these stories about what we're seeing. And sometimes the story gets so divorced from what's really going on with your animal that you fail to see what's really going on with your animal. And so sometimes um, just looking at that eye, judging where that head is 2 seconds ago in relation to the withers. What's that jawline look like? You know, because your horse is communicating to you all the time. We just don't necessarily pay attention to the signals. And if something's bothering them, that's noise. And if you're trying to send a signal and your signal's lost in that noise, they can't find it. And so if you get really aggressive trying to send that signal, all you do is create more noise. So your job really should be, what's bothering my horse? How can I reduce the noise so that they can get with me, so they can give me their attention? They can't give you their attention if they're, you know, not feeling safe because of all this noise. But if you can start to up-regulate, down-regulate, that noise starts to decline, your signal can get less and less, and pretty soon it's almost magic. They're finding that signal because you've handled the noise for them. They can find that signal, and people will look at you and they won't even know how you're giving a signal to your horse or mule. That's how sensitive they can be. But if you don't handle this and you start getting heavy-handed and forceful, then your signal has to be large and your horse is reacting to you versus having a conversation with you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we forget about that conversation piece. That this, we're supposed to be communicating. We're supposed to be uh, paying attention to their expressions, and I found that the more I pay attention to them, the more they pay attention to me. As humans, we got that big old fat ego that gets in our way, and we say, "Hey, I'm in charge, but I feed you, I paid for you, pay attention to me." But yet we don't pay attention to them, and I think about, if this was a human relationship, and it was all about me, 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 and I just wanted the other person to pay attention to me all the time, but yet I don't notice them, that other person would leave pretty quick. They're not gonna hang out and be my pal. But yet we expect that with the horse or the mule.
I know, you know, and if they're trying to talk to us in the only way they can through their nervous system, they're trying to communicate with us. Hey, that's a little too fast. Or, I'm not ready quite yet to go there. Give me a second. As they're trying to communicate that to us, or I'm in pain. If if we're not listening at all, and then they'll stop trying to talk to us. And you don't want that because if they start to hide what's going on with them, that's where people say, oh, this explosion came out of nowhere. Well, no, you just kept stacking it on and your horse stopped communicating with you so you couldn't see it
Yeah.
because you've ignored it. And now you've got a problem and you don't know where it came from because you never listened all the way down the. So you can make it so much easier for yourself. If and your horse will recognize when you're looking for those signs.
You know, you've taught me so much about that pause, that dwell time. Martin talks about soak time, that dwell time. And you know, I was hanging out with Martin up there at the shoe fly, and we were chasing the rope and dummy and stuff, and you know, I was trying to get my mule to track that rope and dummy, and he was helping me with it, and we finally got the mule kind of hooked onto it, and you know, Martin stops, and we're working on this next piece, and I think I've paused long enough, you know, and I'm gonna go do something else. Martin says, "Whoa, whoa, 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 where are you going? Just stay right there." I'm like, "Oh, okay." He's like, if you think you've waited long enough, wait a little longer, you know, and I've quoted Martin on that so many times, you know. And then the other thing he taught me too, and is 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 that ability to be still. He says, just be invisible. You know, when you stop, just be invisible. Just don't move. You know, and something that I've noticed is how often we interrupt that soak time. Even with petting him, we think we're doing good. It's not like we're trying to. It's not like we're trying to do something wrong, but we go to pet him and we think, you know, it's a good like a good game type of thing. No, just leave him alone.
Right. If I took you, Ty, and I had you do something, but I had you in a functional MRI machine so I could see your brain while I'm showing you something, then we stop, and an area of your brain called the hippocampus. Actually, I just happen to have a brain here.
What's the chances, right?
Yeah. So there's an area in your temporal lobe here, the hippocampus, same as in your horse, that's related to memory. But that area is trying to manufacture the memory you just created. So it needs to replay it, and it'll replay it 20 times faster than you can. And it'll consolidate that memory. But if you're in that machine and I come up and I slap you on the leg, how you doing in there, Ty? That goes away. So that replay is so important. When that horse goes to licking and chewing, you know, afterwards, and then they get a little dreamy eyed and start blinking and they lick and chew some more, and their head comes down a little bit more. That's the replay. And, you know, if you got to reward your horse, wait a while, scratch on them, rub on them, because those are things in nature. Those are analogs that they understand that they tolerate, that spanking. There's nothing. Now, you might say, well, my horse licks and chews when I spank it. It licks and chews because it knows the work stopped, right? But that actual physical contact is not pleasant to the horse and actually is a little disruptive. So, you know, Martin's right. You just kind of wait it out uh, because what are you going to say? Well, I regret having waited so long that my horse really has consolidated this information. Now, that was time wasted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was way too much. That was just way too much good stuff. They learned way too much. No, it's funny. So here's a little story about me, Steve, way back when, you know, and this is before evidence-based horsemanship. This is just how I grew up. And I think we were onto something, but we were just a little too early. So way back when, you know, I was training horses and mules for the public, we'd work through something, whatever, anything. And we'd stop and we would wait until they licked and chewed. But as soon as they licked and chewed, we're like, all right, we're good to go. Do it again. And then as soon as you and Martin come along, I'm like, oh geez, what have I done? I've how many times have I interrupted a good soak time, a good a good dwell time because I just waited for the licking and chewing to just begin, and I thought that was my check mark. Like, oh, I've got it. Let's go. And I was missing the boat.
You know, it would be amazing, and people would be amazed at how good their mule or their horse was if all they did, let's say all they did is everything that they went out and did with their horse, they were just counting up the licks and chews and counting up the good experiences. And once their horse learned something, even just saying, that's enough, partner, you know, go dwell on it, go hang out with the other horses. uh, you'd be amazed at what a super learner your horse would become and what a great foundation you would create uh, in your horse. but our egos say, well, we need to be the guy that does it. You know, there are Mustangs out there running around right now. They're not just standing around saying, I hope a human shows up, show me how to trot and show me how to how to gallop and actually
Yeah.
show me how to go left or right because I'm just stuck.
Yeah, I need help with my leads.
They know exactly how to
Yeah.
do that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just our relationship and how to direct that. And if we
Yeah.
can direct that and work as a team, then we can optimize that. But the ego that I got to show them every single thing um, actually gets in the way. Um,
Yeah. I tell my students sometimes, I say, it'd be good if you guys could come to these clinics and each of you brought 30 head and you just do one round of whatever with each head and then you tie it up and just leave it alone the rest of the day. I said that would be our best way to probably teach the horses and the mules. And but what I've learned, Steve, and maybe you could speak on this, or at least what I've noticed is, like these horses and these mules, they're born and they're up on their feet within an hour. If they're not on their feet within an hour, we get worried, right? Like if they're not up and oftentimes they're running within an hour or two. They're trotting around. And us, it takes us a year to, or whatever, to learn how to waddle around a little bit, and we're still not very good. Some of us are adults, and we're still not good at moving around. um, so it seems like the horse and the mule, they learn movements so much quicker than we do, and sometimes we put our human mind on that, thinking that, well, we need another round, we need another set here, so that the horse can get it. When, yeah, maybe we need the practice. That's why I tell my students it'd be great if you brought 30 of them, because then maybe you could get multiple rounds and get the practice in, but we're not burning up your horses. And it's interesting to me.
oh, good point. I'm glad you brought this up. There's two aspects of this I wanna address. One is you're exactly right, is that uh, they're built, horses, they're hardwired for movement. And there's a process called myelinization that once a neuron fires once or twice, here's your $10 word for the day. These oligodendrocytes, these cells get attracted to that firing. So they rush down there and they start to wrap this myelin wrapping around the neuron. Well, if a naked neuron is going to send messages about 2 miles an hour and they're going to dissipate a bit. But once they get myelinated, they can travel up to 200 miles an hour and they're just as strong all the way down that pathway. So when you see that foal shaky when they're first trying to stand up, neurons are firing. And as they start to hone that out, an area called their cerebellum, horse brain, that's the cerebellum back here, that structure is designed for balance and fine motor movement, sequencing, timing, all happens with the cerebellum. So every time they're moving, they're sending signals down their motor system and to the cerebellum. And the cerebellum saying, nope, not in conscious language, but by the language of neurobiology, it's sending messages back to that cerebellum saying, nope, hone it down a little bit. Nope, that's not quite right. And so it's amazing because in hours, you can see that cerebellum start to influence that foal. And that foal will stretch in the craziest positions. They'll leap up in the air and they don't know where they're going when they come back down. They're just off over here. But how soon are they like lockstep with mama, moving right along? And if you take a
Yeah.
group of horses, let's say you let 50 horses out of a pasture and they're running into a new pasture, watch their footfall and watch how often they're all synchronized. And then they'll, like a flock of birds, no, one horse isn't holding its leg out there saying, okay, we're making a left turn here, you know, that horse will turn and they'll all be on the same lead as they're moving. So this synchrony, this harmony in their nervous system is built in. And they will seek that out in you because you'll start to, if you get in sync with them, that's natural for them. Unfortunately, we often, because of lack of balance, and then they have to atone for our balance. So the dance gets lost, but it's like a dance. And if you both get a feel for each other, there's a natural synchrony or harmony in there. Now, if we want to take over and control, oftentimes if we're yanking on the reins or we spur them, the dance gets lost. And and but the horse will still try to meet you. I mean, they'll still try to get back with you, even though we mess it up. But the idea is learning to stay out of the way and learning to dance. I mean, if you were a dance partner, you could grab your partner and manhandle them through every step, right? But they're not really learning. They're just kind of getting manhandled and trying to adjust to it. They're making adjustments. You could be a real clod and have no rhythm at all and step all over your partner's feet,
That's
right?
that's me.
But what you could do is both of you get a feel for each other, and both of you, and that's what I mean by conversation, is both of you start to get a feel for each other and start to meet each other somewhere in the middle, and then you get an understanding of each other. And I'm talking about a physical, uh, a sensory system type of, and then the sensory system in the horse is just linked to the motor system. So they understand that and they get comfortable with that. So they're not having to get way up here sympathetically aroused. They do if you're, you know, spurring them like you're gigging a frog or you're yanking on their face, then they're going to come out of that and they're going to get sympathetically aroused. But that is just a natural movement to them. That's a natural phenomenon. And you get in touch with that and you watch riders who are in sync with that, it just looks like the two become one. And it's built in. All you can do is mess it up. So trying to find a rhythm where you're not in control, you're in control to the extent that you're um, directing and you're sending messages so that the messages are understood and you're moving together. I'm not saying you just throw your reins away, but that whole movement thing, if you get that going, it's already hardwired in your horse. So that could save you a lot, and you can be a much better rider if you just start to understand how am I connected? How is my brain communicating to them? Not through words, you have to get beyond that. That's why I did this neuropoetry thing. I wanted to get away from words. It, and that I think was kind of what Tom Dorrance was talking about long ago with this whole idea of feel. A lot of people, have decided what that all meant. But I think it's just in having the two nervous systems sync up and get in harmony.
Yeah, and that's good stuff right there. I think it all starts right here in our head. Like we got to think about it, and
Yeah.
like you just said, you got to get beyond words. And
You go to a
I,
clinic and if you
yeah,
say, well, people are saying, well, are my jeans too tight? And I wonder if people think I'm foolish and, oh, I goofed up on that one. And you got this whole dialogue and you can't, when you're up there, you're not in communication with your horse. You're somewhere else. And if you expect them to be with you, then you can't be somewhere else. You got to be with them. We often demand, be with me, don't be looking out over the fence or doing this other stuff. Um, but it's unfair to demand that of our horse, and we can't deliver it to them.
every good horseman I've ever been around, they're really good at being still. They're good at just being quiet mentally.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people that are quiet physically, like they can stand still and not move, but all the greats I've been around have an ability to get their mind quiet, and I think it's too challenging. We can't say, well, well, don't. we can't say a whole bunch of don'ts. Like, well, don't think about that. Don't think about that. I had an amazing coach um, when I was on the rodeo team in college for Utah Valley University. It was UVSC at the time. You know what I'm talking about. You're from up in that country a little bit.
Yeah.
So Louis Field, he was the coach there, and he was so good about getting us to think only about what we wanted to have happen and visualize what we wanted to do. And he would say, you don't have time to think about all these things you don't want. Now he was talking about us in our individual sports, but what I've come to realize with mules and horses, it's the same way. If my mind is so busy with all the, well, don't run off with me, well, don't buck, well, don't eat grass there, don't do this and don't do that. It's like this busy these busy signals going on all the time. And if we just think about, hey, I'm riding down the trail here. I'm riding to that tree. I'm riding to go get those cows. And I just see what I want to do, you know. Hanging out with Martin, like speaking of think about what you want, like that guy can get you thinking about what you want, especially with cattle. He's like, well, just what do you want the cows to do? What do you want them to do? I
Yeah.
want them to go through that gate. Well, okay, well, think about going through that gate. That's what you're doing. Go, send them through the gate. It's just simple, right? It's simple to say. It's hard to do.
It's simple but hard as heck.
Yes.
You're exactly right. And let's go back to that example. Like you're in the functional MRI, and sports psychologists tell people visualize yourself doing something. So a skier visualize themselves skiing down the slope. And what you find is those same brain areas are lighting up in that person's brain as if they were actually going down that slope. And if you were to look at them, it, it, you know, the motor strip is lighting up, the sensory areas are lighting up, the same as what those poles would feel like. And so if that's happening, if your motor strip's lighting up and you're sending messages through your body, but you're just not acting on them, or you don't think you are, if you're thinking about something, a task, you're actually sending messages. And with that sensory system that can tell when a breeze has picked up, when a single fly has landed on them, for sure they're picking up a lot of that stuff. And so, it's not a language or a yeehaw to get up to that thing or what's going to go wrong. You're right. Because if you're thinking about what's going to go wrong, what's going to happen? I've seen clinics where Martin said, come watch this clinic with me. And, you know, well, you'll see who's nervous. Martin will say, let your reins out a little bit. Well, I am. Quit pulling on your horse's mouth. Well, I'm not. And then I watch them. And as Martin starts talking, they even get nervous. So their legs start to squeeze like a clothespin. And then their horse gets fidgety, right? And they think they're completely still, but in their mind, they're letting that anxiety, they're saying all of the don'ts to themselves, just like you just mentioned. And if you just change that mental piece, and you shouldn't think that that's woo woo. You shouldn't think that that's just uh, uh, you know self-help talk, because you could take people who are depressed and they just tell themselves all the time, this is going to happen terrible, this bad thing is going to happen. And you get a PET scan of their brain, and these areas of the brain that usually light up when you're just normal are not lighting up. So their whole thinking changes what happens in their world. They're almost predetermining what happens. And then let's say they go through psychotherapy, um, and they start talking about things and they start to see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I give them a PET scan and their brain's going to light up. And so it's actually a neurobiological reality. That's not woo woo self talk.
Yeah.
If you just tell yourself, oh, it's going to be a lucky day, it's going to be a happy day, and you keep saying it again and again, that's different than if somatically your body actually experiences what you're sending. So if you look at that gate and you say, we're going through that gate, and you start to move towards that gate, your neurons are going to enlist with you. They're going to actually do that. And what you do gets wired. To the you that's sitting right here today, after we have this talk, tomorrow you'll be slightly different. You're not you who you were 5 years ago, just because of the way your brain has wired things. And so wire in good stuff. Your brain won't know the difference. Just wire in that, hey, we're going to make this happen. This is going to occur. I can visualize it. Your body will start to do it anyway, and you'll start to wire it in your brain. And that's just what you're doing with your horse, too. A lot of horses have bad wiring. We're not going to blame the horse for the wiring. And so oftentimes rehabbing that horse, the task actually is I got to go in and rewire. But I can't rewire if I got all these bad chemicals in there. I got to get the horse feeling safe. I got to do some exercises that may be simple. I got to do some things that I change the whole neurochemistry in their brain. Now they're in a place that they can create a new foundation. And you're the one that's responsible. Somebody put that in there. And I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm already starting to say this, is that one time Martin, I said, were you really listening to what that lady was telling you about her horse? And he said, well, that wasn't for me. I said, what do you mean? He said, that was for her. She's got a story and she's got to tell it. And it would be rude of me not to hear her out. But to know how that horse is really wired, that horse is going to tell me everything I need to know. So I'll spend 5 minutes with that horse, and the horse will tell me the real story of how that wiring is. She's got a story, but I have no idea whether that's the real story or not. But I gotta listen to it. Right?
Yeah, I can relate so much to that, Steve. We all have a story. What's the saying? There's two sides in the truth. It's like, all right, let's see things from your point of view, and then let's see things from the mule's point of view, and we'll see if they match up. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But oh man, yeah, and there's so many people that get into a negative mindset, and I tell people, I'm not particularly just overly optimistic, like hunky dory, everything's perfect every day. But I've been around the people I've chosen to be around. They're just winners in life. Like things just always work out. I did a podcast with Casey Field, Louis' son. I told you about my coach
Yeah,
Louis.
yeah.
And Casey, he's the most positive guy, but it's almost a disservice to say that he's a positive guy because for him, it's not being positive or negative. It's just reality. It's just going to work out. And Martin's kind of like that too. It's not particularly a positive or negative. Like we're going to load this horse in the trailer. Like it's going to work out. Either that or you're going to trot home 30 miles. You choose. And we're going to get the cows today. We're going to do these things today. It's going to work out. It's just how it does. It always works out for me. And I try hard to have that mindset, Steve, that's going to work out. And then I have what I experience a lot with many people is they say, yeah, 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 but what if? And I say, I understand. You should have contingency plans for these little things. That's called being prepared. But once you're prepared and you have those things, well, now it's time to go do the job. Yes, this could come up. The cows could jump that fence. They could. And maybe they probably will. You know. And now they're on the wrong side of the fence. Okay, this is just part of the job. What are you going to do about it? Let's go get the cows. It's going to work out. This is going to be fine. And we can let ourselves go down such a negative mental rabbit hole. I think people get stuck in that a little bit, the negative rut of mindset. And I think in my career, Steve, that's one of the hardest things to get people out of that negative mindset. And the best way that I've found is I'll ask them at the beginning of the clinic, what do you want? And they'll say, "Well, I don't want my mule to buck me off." I say, "No, no, no, hold on. What do you want? Because you just said a don't. Tell me what you want." Like, well, I'd like them to stop biting me. Like, no, no, no. What do you want? See, all they have so many don'ts, and we have to get our brain thinking and like you're talking about, visualizing and getting those neurons firing that you're talking about of uh, and seeing the result that we want to have happen instead of all these don'ts because yeah, it's just amazing how that affects our mind so much, how we think and how we talk.
Yeah, if you want a capable brain, a brain that's capable of doing what you need to do in your horsemanship, then, and brains are created by our experience and by how we view things. You know, your reality is different than mine. You know, we can even say the word horse, but your whole idea is going to be based on your experiences with horses, and that's going to be different than mine. So the reality in our brain is really only our own reality. And if you recognize that and then realize you're not adrift out there with just the world deciding how to create that world inside your own head, but you can actually, I do this all the time. I'll go for a walk in nature. I'll be riding my horse, and I just stop for a second and say, store this away. You're feeling better than you ever have in this saddle. You're communicating better than you ever have. Look at those pine trees. Look at that stream. Look how clear it is, because all that stuff will get away from you. And when you start to do that, somehow your world shifts. It starts to be a better world and one where things feel better because you're paying attention to them and you're storing that away. And when you realize that you're the one actually creating that, then you get the confidence that, yeah, I can create this. We're going to go do this thing. I'm going to create this. And you're also creating the same wall. You're building those walls around you when you say, I don't want this. And and it gets sent up to your brain, and you just got a brain full of don'ts, and you almost get frozen in being able to act because you're trying to get through all these walls and it freezes you up. And so instead of moving ahead and just going with it, and you're right. So the cows all jump the fence. Okay, well, our task is still to get them over where we wanted to get them. So let's go over there and get them versus, and I've seen that time and time again. The cows get revved up, then the person gets revved up. Now they're somewhere else,
Yeah.
and they're so revved up, the cows are going every which way because they're feeling that. So let's go get the neighbors. Now they got their ATVs out there, and everybody's yipping and hollering, everybody's cussing, and
Yeah.
now it's chaos. You
Hmm.
can actually create, and Mark and I talk about this all the time in low stress cattle handling, for want of a better, that's not like the name of a program or anything, just basically, changing the chemistry of you got the herd, and the herd's going to be filled with oxytocin. That's a bonding chemical, right? And the herd's going to be filled with serotonin. That's the same emotionally balancing uh, neurochemical that's in us. So if you're moving them along and the herd's a good place to be and there's a flow to it, a 10-year-old kid by themselves can get, you know, the cattle just moving along from this pasture to that pasture. You close the gate, and they're not milling around and trying to bust the gate down. But if you decide, I'm going to add some norepinephrine, I'm going to add some cortisol to this herd, you make the herd full of cortisol. Now no cow wants to be in the herd because that's where all the cortisol and stress is. Babies want to get back to where they were last safe, so they start darting back. Mamas start bawling because they can't find their babies. You get somebody who's going to yeehaw this all back together and control it. So they run the cows, the subordinate cows up, to the front of the herd, the more dominant ones turn around and you start to get the head button going places. Now all the cows are hiding because they don't want to be in the herd. And who created that? Right? Who created all that? So, oftentimes it really is. Check your own nervous system, find out where you want to go. It's not woo-woo to even send that message where you think, and that's where people think, oh, there was some telepathic thing going on. You know, really, it's in your own neurobiology. Just find it and start to trust in it and practice it. Practice that kind of thing where this is going to happen. And and when you feel those don'ts come up, say, I don't really have room for that. Today I got to just practice doing this. And you'll start to wire that in and it'll become part of who you are. And it will because the believability will be in these things will be happening. You know, to, to think we're in isolation is is not really the truth, that we're all mammals and we all have a way of communicating and that they're sensing things on a differently than we are. Even cows have a nervous system close to a horse. They're just less reactive, so you understand that these are all nervous system and you start to work with the nervous system instead of against it and stop trying to control it because the biggest stressor for every horse is restraint. If you think of most of the wrecks you've seen, it's because of, somebody trying to restrain that horse when they're heading up versus being able to pull the plug and let them come back down. Uh, it's amazing that your horsemanship and the horses under you will improve tenfold if you just go with it and work with those nervous systems. It's they'll turn into super learners and you'll realize, hey, I am so much more powerful than I thought I was. Not powerful and I'm going to grab on and make it happen because we can make horses do things, but powerful in the way that this horse is so able to explore. It so wants to learn. Its curiosity is right on the surface. And I've created that. That's powerful.
Yeah. So I was just in Bonners Ferry, Idaho,
Hmm.
and at the end of the clinic, one of the students comes up and he needs a little help trailer loading his mule, which is normal. This comes up, I mean, once or twice every 5 clinics or so, somebody needs help with something like this, and so this is not unusual. But we get over there and I just say, okay, go ahead and just show me what you're working on here. Let me just see how you're going about doing this. And you talk about restraint and you talk about how that's one of the worst things we can do. And it's interesting how we just go to it, right? Um, so basically, long story short, this guy wants to just kind of drag his mule into the trailer for lack of better vocabulary. He's pulling on the lead rope and and it's clear that his mule's like, no, bud, this ain't not today. You know, you can see the corner of the eyes. The mule's attention is not even in the trailer. The mule's thinking, I'd rather be way over there.
Yeah.
And so I say, okay, let's let's apply this principle of everybody knows the principle, right thing easy, wrong thing difficult. But so many folks focus on making the wrong thing harder instead of making the right thing easier. So I always try to put an emphasis, let's make the right thing easier. So you want them to go in the trailer. Yes, yes. Okay. This trailer needs to be easy. This trailer needs to be a good thing. How does your mule feel about this trailer right now? You're sitting here trying to drag this mule in. We're trying to pull it in. All the pressure's at the trailer, the mule wants to go away from the trailer, but you're making it stay here at the trailer. So I'm big into free agency. I'm like, hey, let's just set it up and let them make some choices here. Let's let them make some choices. If that mule chooses to go in, it'll be a piece of cake. This will be no big deal. Right now, the mule, that's the last thing it wants to do is go in that trailer. And so I said, so how can we make the trailer easier? He said, well, I can go do some groundwork over there outside the trailer, and he began that. But the problem was it was right next to the trailer. I said, let's adjust this a little bit. How about you go 30 feet away, way over there, and you do a little bit. So he did a little bit. Interesting, Stephen, and this kind of goes back to your optimal learning frame of mind, but he's going through this groundwork at a very, very basic level. And the mule, I see it. It's actually self-regulating in the groundwork away from the trailer. And I go, oh no.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he goes back to the trailer and he wants to pull it in again. I went, no, whoa. We got to change this up. And he said, well, I did the groundwork away and then I came over here. I said, yes,
He made a
but
nice safe spot 30 feet
yes,
away.
yes.
Yeah.
I said, no, we go over there and do the groundwork at a heightened level. You know, don't put too much gasoline on that fire because now you're going to be getting drugged down the road. But go do a little bit there. But I need to see that mule's tail swishing. I need to kind of see them get their head up a little bit and see a little bit of confusion. And then you're going to come back toward this trailer and you're going to do nothing. Don't try to drag it in this time. So don't do nothing. Just bring it near. And near could be, and we started this way. Near is like come within 15 feet of the trailer and just leave it alone. We just started working with this rubber band effect. And as you know, the ending of these stories, it works out to where we made the sell that, hey, the trailer is now the good place, and out there it's not as comfortable. But here's something at the very end. This is why I want to get back to the restraint thing is, okay, so we finally get the round where the mule goes in the trailer. And you've seen it a million times. The first reaction from the person,
Slam
hurry,
that door.
yeah, hurry, tie him up, slam the door. I'm like, whoa. No. Don't do anything. Don't even talk to the mule. Don't even look at the mule. Just leave it alone. He's like, well, we got it in. I'm like, yeah, but don't worry, bud. We're gonna get it in like 10 times. It's gonna be okay. We and just leave it. And I said, just sit here and just watch the mule's expressions. And the mule was pretty tight still. It was in the trailer, but it was still tight. You know, the eyes were not blinking. It was still breathing in its chest. You know, lips were still tight. And it kind of had mules are really good at getting that. I call it that parrot lip. You know, when the
Yeah.
top lip sticks
Yeah.
out. That's big time in the donkeys, and the mules get it a lot too. Horses do too, as you know. But I'm like, just you see that? Okay, the mule's not comfortable yet. Let's just leave it alone here because we're trying to make this whole sales pitch that this trailer's a good deal for this, but this guy. So, anyways, we sit there, and it was interesting the time it took because it probably I don't know I didn't have a watch going right that second, but it seemed as if it probably took probably literally 2 minutes to 3 minutes for that mule to let down, and finally it made a big blink and the big breath and licking and chewing, and then the guy's like, "Okay, do we shut the door now?" I'm like, "No, definitely don't do it now. Definitely not now. Just leave it alone. No restraint, bud. Just leave it alone." And so,
Let's
yes,
take the
it's
door off that
interesting.
damn trailer.
Yes. Yeah. Just we don't need no stinking door. But it's just in our mindset so much to contain and and at some I mean, we do have to contain them at some point. Yeah, we all got corrals. We all got fences, we all got halters and lead ropes. I get it. But I think giving them those freedoms to choose and you just set it up so that they can make those choices. Um, it should make such a big difference.
Yeah, and if you looked at it in terms of and Martin now looks at it as I'm just changing the cocktails. I just got to be
Yeah.
a bartender here and change the cocktails. And what he means by that is that, you know, if you get that horse to the lip of the trailer and think that's where things are going to start and they want nothing to do with that trailer, all you're doing by trying to force at that point is a neurochemical called norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is benign by itself, but what it does, it sensitizes neurons. So you don't want to sensitize all the wrong ones to send you up to be so sympathetically aroused that you panic and you fight and you're just looking fight or flight. Those eyes are back here, not towards that trailer. So in your example, you took the mule back out and you're doing this, you know, easy groundwork. And now that groundwork has serotonin, some emotional balance. That mule now feels safer without the threat of that trailer. So you're making that spot a really good spot to be, but that's not helping you too much in your trailer loading. But once you got that mule up in that trailer, because restraint is such uh, an arousing, stress-inducing thing that you almost want them to back out right away because you want them to see that they can get out, and then you get them back in again, and it's just giving you an opportunity and your mule a chance to change that chemistry because each time they get in and they get a little more comfortable, but with it, the norepinephrine's going down because you flooded with norepinephrine, you're draining that. And that's what you saw in that mule. It was just frozen in there, right? And you're raising good chemicals like serotonin in there, and they're getting emotionally balanced. And now, if you just keep that back and forth, basically what you're doing is that mule, not you're convincing them, but that mule actually says, you know what? There's serotonin in that trailer. They don't say that in their brain. That trailer feels good. I don't mind walking on there because I know what the inside feels like. But if you slam doors, if you change that neurochemistry, if you don't wait for that balance to happen, then yeah, you might get them on board and they might get on board a little better. Probably not, though, next time around. But if if you look at the task, you'll get hung up. But if you look at it as a neuro exercise, then everything's fine. Then that transfers out into the tarp. That transfers out into the water crossing. That transfers out everywhere. So if it's a neuro exercise in getting that adjustment, and your horse trusts you too. If you give that horse time to do that, and that's the process, they'll use that process with everything and they'll trust. Think of the kid on the end of the diving board with the big kids trying to throw him off, right? There's no way they want to go up there and go off that. There's no way they want to even climb that ladder to get to the high
Yep.
dive.
You're talking about me again.
But if, yeah,
Yeah.
you could do it old school and throw them in the deep end,
Yep.
or you could let
Yep.
them walk down to the end of the diving board, peer off, dangle their feet, maybe jump off, and then finally dive. And pretty soon you can't keep them off that high dive. They just want to get up there and go. And the horse has the same pharmacy in their head that you have. And if you learn, what you're learning is where the taps are. I need a little more norepinephrine because I need my horse to be a little more attentive. I need them to be a little more focused. Oh, I got some testosterone playing a role here. I need to turn that spigot down a little bit. And I have to make some changes here. That horse is uncomfortable. I got to bring him down, raise that serotonin. If you learn, you don't have to know the big terms. Like there's a guy, Tommy Saunders, who said, I knew the how, I just lacked the vernacular, right?
Yeah.
And once he knew the why, his how got 10 times better
Mm.
because then he understood what was going on underneath all of that. And yeah, we can get horses to do all kinds of things, but getting them to do it versus making them do it is a world of difference. Really, it's night and day.
Oh man. Yeah, life is about choices, and every mule or horse that I've let make choices, and of course we do set it up, and we do try to definitely influence the right choice as best as we
Yeah.
can, um, but letting them make choices. It's like I was helping a buddy of mine move cows, and we talk about cows a lot here,
Mhm.
but I was helping him move cows, and there was another fella with us. And I was telling him, I said, I almost, and there was one mother cow that kept kind of looking off, kept kind of looking off, this is going to be a long day. And I knew that, okay, if she keeps doing this, coming about mid-morning, that cow is going to really give us a hard time. So I was telling him, I said, I almost wish that cow would just kind of run off from the herd right now, because if she did,
Yeah.
I would go circle her out there and put a lot of heat on her away from that herd. And then as soon as she fades back toward the herd, I'd just ease right off. And if she does that one or two, three times, she's going to want to stay with the herd because she'll know that every time I go out, there's some heat coming on me. So I almost wish she would just make that choice and get it over with right now. And,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
about making choices. Yeah.
That's exactly right. If that cow breaks off from the herd and you go yeehaw 'em right exactly back into that herd again, you really haven't changed the neurochemistry. They're still going to say, "Well, I feel better when I'm cutting out of here,"
Hmm.
right? But you're right. You change that neurochemistry where you can go ahead out there, but that's a sea of cortisol out there. And you got a river of serotonin right here. So you can go swim in that sea of cortisol, but you on horseback have to go out there and create those waves of cortisol. Hey, this does not feel good out here. And then your problem solved for the rest of the day, maybe for a long, long time, because that feels really good. And some have to go test those waters and play in the deep end.
Yep.
Uh, and you just gotta, but if you look at it that way, that it's a neurobiological problem, then you take all the anger out of it, you take out all the emotions, you take out all that god dang cow, what are they, I'll show you, I'll teach you a lesson. That vocabulary, you're not giving me any respect. That vocabulary really needs to get out of your head, you know,
Yeah.
because it really is, and it's a simple problem. It's a simple problem unless you complicate it.
No, I love how you bring these thoughts and these lessons, home, Steve. This is awesome because one quick story. I know you're running short on time here. You probably got to get going.
Well, I'm
One
getting myself so interested in this
one
in our discussion, but yeah, I'm happy to answer the what if
yeah.
one more thing to hear.
So recently at a clinic, there was there's a woman there, and she's working with her horse, and her horse was pretty bothered about the saddle and things behind it, and this horse uh, would blow up and buck for a minute, and I tell her, I said, don't worry about it, just we don't want him to take off and tear off. So if you can kind of block it a little bit, but then just leave him alone, let him come down, we'll make some progress. And this happened about, I don't know, he probably blew up 5 or 6 times in that session. And at the end of the session, she came up to me and she was upset because she felt like, hey, I wasn't able to really do the class, and I wasn't able to work on, all these different pieces of groundwork, and I feels like I didn't get anything done. I feel like I did too much and that horse wasn't ready. And I said, hold on, hold on. You're basing all of your progress and your success off of a checklist of items that I was teaching in class. You know, you thought being successful here meant that you had to be able to, do these movements and maneuvers. I said, hey, think about your horse's success today. And she was like, what are you talking about, bud? And I said, well, how many times did he blow up and buck? And she said, yeah, 5 or 6. Okay. I said, how was the sixth time compared to the first time? And she said, well, he just barely, really just kind of crow hopped a little bit. And I said, okay, now how quick did he come off of that stress the sixth time versus the first time? Like, how quick did he self-regulate? And she said, oh, he he just crow hopped a little bit at the end, and then he just licked and chewed and came right down. The first time he held on to tension, I said, your success today, yeah, you didn't really do this and that and these maneuvers, but hey, this is more important. Your horse learned a great skill set today, learning how to self-regulate, learning how to come off of this, because today it was the saddle that stimulated him. Tomorrow it might be the grouse, the pheasant, the elk, the deer. the hiker, the dreaded pack llama, whatever. There's gonna be something else, and he knows how to deal with some stress now. So I know that you don't feel like you got a lot out of the actual, the maneuvers of the clinic, but I said you got something way better than that, and that's horse ability to self-regulate.
That's huge. In fact, yeah, if people looked at that progress, um, it's a different story if you yeehawed your horse, they went to bucking and they kept bucking and you let them, they took off fleeing. Um, but yeah, let's say they bucked 8 times that first time, and then you were able to block them enough to come to park, you know, and then the next time you start to move them out and they go to bucking and it's 6 times. And you go, oh, look, my horse is still bucking, but it's 6 times. And your horse finally breathes out and where the heck am I? What happened to me? And the next time it's 4 times. And the next time it's 2 times. How many people can't get their horses to park? You know? So this horse, you're exactly right, has learned I can come up and I can come down. I can go way, way up and I can come down. And each time that horse's nervous system is changing so that, it may be after that crow hop that you can't get that horse to buck again. And the horse learns there's a safe spot. I got super aroused, but I didn't have to come apart and run away. Just stopping and getting hold of myself was my safe spot. And I found that safe spot here. And then I found that safe spot over there. Once they learn the safe spot is portable, you can get them out of the round pen and you can go for a ride because they can take the safe spot with them. They learn it's internal, not from you, because you can't grab your horse under here and go, relax, damn it. Right? You got to get them to find
Yeah,
it themselves. And when they do,
yeah,
they that safe spot they can take with them. So you're right. That whole story is a huge learning experience in a short amount of time, really.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's having the open mind to see the value in other lessons besides checking off a list of things to do, of
Yeah.
movements, and you know, yeah, yeah. I need to be able to back up and turn and stop. Those are all good things, but having my mule or my horse be able to self-regulate is pretty important too. So,
Yeah.
that's a
And when the
valuable
learning
lesson.
comes from that relaxed alertness,
Yeah,
they have to be alert, but they're relaxed internally. They're not reacting. They're comfortable with all the emotions going through them, and they're aware of everything around them. That's why I hate that desensitization where you think you got to get horses to check out and block everything. No, you want them aware of everything so that they don't
yeah,
explode on you when they finally come out of that fog you
yeah,
know, and if you get them in that nice spot, uh, yeah, your horse it'll amaze you all the things you can accomplish when you do that. I got to tell you, I really enjoyed our chance to talk here, and I want to tell you to keep up the good work. I know that you're always learning, and mules get the best deal they can get with you. And yeah, anybody who ever comes to me with a mule and says, uh, I don't live far from Utah, and I I've got a mule, and I said, well, how do you not know about Ty Evans?
I appreciate it, Steve. Hey,
Yeah,
at the end of all my episodes, I always ask the my guests for a word of advice. Now, you've already given tons of advice and everything, but um, to somebody listening today that's going through this thing called life, and this advice, it could be horsemanship, it could be brain advice, it could be life advice. What's a piece of advice you'd like to leave somebody today?
start to get aware of all the good things, and don't let them pass by. When even it could be the warm water in the shower. Just say, man, this feels good. I'm going to lock this in. And every time you interact with your horse and it's a good episode, lock that in. And you get enough of that in the bank, and pretty soon you don't realize how, but your life's gotten pretty meaningful because you got a bank full of good experiences. And that actually is biological. You can wire that in your brain, and the world will look different because the world will be different if you're willing to just focus on the good. We get so frazzled and focus on what's not going to be good, and we don't realize we're wiring that in.
Yeah,
So be good to yourself and find every good moment for you and your horse, and your world will change.
man, that's great advice. The attitude of gratitude. I like it.
Exactly.
Hey, Steve, where can these listeners and friends of mine find your books and find your information and your courses and maybe give a little quick spiel about all your resources?
Yeah, you can go to horsebrainscience.info. Uh, Pretty much it'll tell you about everything that I'm working on, all my projects, uh, and if you want to purchase the either of the new books, the book with Martin will be out in the fall, the science book. If you're interested in the neuropoetry book, that will be out well on Friday. And you
Yeah,
can get that from my website, horsebrainscience.info, but also Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. Um, so I appreciate that opportunity. I do horse brain science clinics throughout the world. What I do in those clinics, and you can find horsebrainscience.info, you can look up those events. What I do is just like Ty and I've had a talk like this, I go into depth on the horse's nervous system, how we interact with the horse, how to understand it, how to see it, how to respect it. I do a horse brain dissection, but it's hands-on. I make you put on the gloves and you actually hold that horse's brain and look at all the circuitry. That alone takes care of a lot of myths about left brain, right brain, how the eyes work. I can just map that all out for you. And then I demonstrate with some horses so you can actually see it in real time, what's going on with the horse. And what I tell people is, you know, it's evidence-based. I don't make this stuff up. I don't say anything unless I have the evidence to support it. And you don't have to believe what I say. Just go ask your horse. Listen to some of this and just go ask your horse or your mule. Um, and what do you have to lose? I think you have everything to gain. And I think in terms of welfare, in terms of how your horse is going to emotionally and psychologically feel better, in terms of their welfare, um, learning to work with their nervous system is a great avenue to get to. So uh, hopefully we've helped some horses as well as their humans in our talk here, Ty.
yeah. All right, Steve. Well, I sure appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much.
You keep up the good work, my friend.
All right. And with that, my friends, Dr. Steve Peters is out here. And man, I really appreciate that. What a good conversation. Steve's a busy guy. I told Sky, I said, I have about an hour with him. And she said, well, how you gonna be able to talk to him for just an hour? And I said, I don't know. I'll do the best I can. But because I could stop, I could talk to Steve all day long. But as you know, he told you where to find his resources, get those books. If you have not read Evidence-Based Horsemanship, you got to do it. And of course, his the next volume's coming out, like he said, later on this year. So looking forward to that. Big shout out to our sponsors that make this podcast free for you. We got Roman Home Tents. If you need a good wall tent, man, you got to look up Roman Homes. They are awesome. Cross between a wall tent and range teepee. Good stuff. Also, Western Mule Magazine, Mules and More Magazine, Diamond W Enterprises, and Colt Salary. Big shout out to all those folks that take care of us, take care of this podcast. I'd love it if you guys would leave us a review. Please, if you're watching on YouTube, which I hope you are, so you could see his little brain um, examples there, leave a comment on YouTube. Let us know how you like the show. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can leave comments there. So, anyways, you guys, thank you so much for listening. God bless you, and we will see you down the road.